Hey everyone, so I'm going to try to cover just the remaining slides that we had from class. I'm going to go through them fairly quickly, but I just wanted to make sure to touch base on each concept. I would definitely spend some time reviewing these slides along with what's in the textbook, particularly for what we have left. But hopefully, just going through the slides will help orient you to the concepts that we had remaining that we didn't get to cover in class. So these are quick podcasts. So if I don't finish in this first 15 minutes, I will do a second one and post that. But where we ended up was with the Stanford Prison Study, and you all had your worksheet that you were to hand in. Basically looking at the dynamics of groups and the roles that form within a group, as well as the setting or the situational forces that are often at play when you have a number of people together in a particular situation. And they do play varying roles, sort of, the dynamics that take over within that context. So I'm really hoping you were able to get your questions answered on the worksheet. But if we just go ahead and look at what we have for the discussion, I was really wanting you to get, what lessons were learned from the study. Like, what did Zimbardo find from covering the study? And what we see is that you can take a normal, seemingly normal individual that has no psychopathy, no history of mental illness, and put them in a situation that really tests their character, is what it does, to see what's going to come out. The dynamics of the situation, the power that the guards were given in this setting really showed to take over the individual sort of concept or self concept of each person. Their role became them. And so did that for the prisoners. You saw a variety of prisoners, some who were very submissive and obeyed and did everything the guards wanted, and some who protested and acted out and led revolts and tried to get the other prisoners to follow. And so not everybody responded the same way. The interesting thing is that these participants could leave the study, as did a couple of the prisoners actually left the study. They sort of had to go to great lengths to do so, which was sort of the unethical part about this study and why it's often talked about in ethics. But they could leave. It wasn't a situation like a real prison where they didn't have that option. Yet the interesting thing is, it still had an effect on them, their person, how they acted and what they felt. And some of the prisoners that did leave left because they felt pushed to their limit. They couldn't take it anymore. So that was pretty interesting, and I don't think Zimbardo was expecting that. And then that just tells us how much power the situation holds. They were put into a setting for the prisoners with limited options. They were given ID numbers instead of their names. They had to wear caps on their heads to simulate shaved heads, which often happen in a prison. And, wearing basically gowns for clothing, just like in a prison where you're given, prison attire. So it's very de-individuating to be in that sort of a situation. And then the guards were given authority, symbols of authority. They couldn't use force, but they certainly had a baton. They had the outfit, the sunglasses. They were told to sort of press the limits with the prisoners, and be creative without using force. And they sure did get creative, as we saw in the video. So I think that the implications for this study, when we think about how it affects the greater world and just the application of it to the real world, is that it has true implications for the justice system. How do we deal out justice to criminals who commit acts within a group setting? Criminals who commit acts because of pressures of a group situation. So someone who commits a crime within a gang, or somebody who commits a corporate crime within a system of other individuals who are also doing the same. How do we dole out justice to those who are commanded to carry out certain actions, and people who do so because they're under the authority of another person, and that other person could hold their job or hold their well-being in the balance if they don't comply and they don't listen. And so I think it causes us to pause and think about how harsh a sentencing should be on an individual versus a group when we're talking about things like this. And that, not all people respond the same. We do still have individual choice, even within a group setting. It's much harder to go against the norms of what's happening in a group. As you saw with the prisoners who revolted, that took a very courageous step and a certain kind of personality to do that, but it's definitely possible. So we think about all those things in terms of sort of lessons learned. Now let's get into some decisions that happen within the group context. One is risky shift, and that is that people will take greater risks as a whole when they're in a group than when they're just an individual. Because again, it's the mask of the group provides kind of a safety net, or the assumption that things are okay or safe if others are doing it. Sort of related to what we talked about with social loafing. People will put less effort forth if they think that the group is as a whole giving effort. So the responsibilities really spread amongst the group members, and no one person feels the responsibility. And the same thing is for decision making within a group setting. We'll make a riskier bet if we're gambling with others, and it's tied to the social status in the group. So, we look at interesting gambling games like craps, or games that involve other players, where you're not just playing you against the house. We make riskier choices and bets, and we gamble more. If you go to a casino and you go with your friends and you take $1,000 with you to gamble with, that is a little bit more risky than if you contribute $1,000 to a pool of cash that everyone's contributing. You're more likely to feel safe because you're like, well, everyone's putting in 1,000, so I'll put in 1,000. Let's lower it. Let's say 100. It feels less risky if everyone's putting their money in. And then, if you lose, you're like, well, everyone lost their money. Well, it doesn't really make it any better. You still lost money. But when you're alone, you feel the weight of that more than when you're in a group. And so that's just, that is in essence risky shift. You're just going to make more riskier moves when you're in that group dynamic. There's also something called group polarization, which happens. That's the tendency for members involved in a group discussion to take more extreme positions than they normally would. Again, suggests riskier actions, risky shift when compared to those who are not participating in the group discussion. So group polarization is really thought to be due to two characteristics of people within social groups. And this is going to go back to things we've talked about in previous chapters. One is social comparison. We need to, or we feel the need to act in ways that we believe make us appear to be socially desirable to others. We feel this pull, this drive. We want to compare favorably with others. So just because of social comparison, we tend to go along with the group and be drawn to what the group is deciding or doing. The other one is informational social influence. So we talked about that when we talked about, we did the chapter on influence and conformity. We have a tendency to take our cues of what's appropriate behavior from others, especially when we're in an ambiguous situation. We're in a situation where we've never been in before. We don't know what to do. So obviously what we're going to do is we're going to look to others as a source of info. Like, okay, maybe he or she has been here before. They look like they know what they're doing. Or, okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go along with some of that. And that's going to make me feel better. But what it's also going to do is it's going to bind me even closer to the group, which I might not have otherwise been. So what you end up having happen is group polarization, okay? And we tend to become polarized in our beliefs, our decisions, in the direction that the group is going. And an attitude or belief can become magnified within a group after being discussed among group members. So, we all have our individual ideas and opinions, but then we get together with the group and we talk about it with the group, and it's clear that certain members of the group feel strongly in one way, and if they're strong characters and we think that they really know what they're talking about, maybe more so than I do, even though I have an opinion, I might go ahead and go along with them because they seem to really carry the weight of the group. So we do this thing where we play off of other people's emotions and attitudes in the group as we're discussing a topic. And a great example of this is jury deliberation. Social comparison is happening every time a jury deliberates. We might have our own thoughts and opinions about the testimonies and evidence we just heard, but so does everybody else have their own thoughts and opinions. And you're always going to get a few outspoken people in the group who then tend to carry the group discussion. And what ends up happening is we adjust our attitudes and all of that. And sometimes it's just because we want to appear favorable within the group. We don't want anyone in the group mad at us. We don't want them thinking we don't know what we're talking about. We don't want them judging us. And that's a strong pull that could draw us, polarize us in one direction towards that which the group seems to be leaning. And remember, we talked about all those persuasion tactics. There might be strong leaders within the group and they feel very strongly on one position and they want everyone else to feel strongly on that position. And so they're going to use those tactics, maybe knowingly, maybe inadvertently, but they're going to, try to flatter you. They're going to foot in the door in the face, using compliments, using fear tactics, however they might do it to get you to go along with the group. And that's even very apparent in web users and different forum groups in social media. You have very strong voices and opinions. And once you get on one of those sort of chats or boards or even just a discussion thread on Facebook, it's clear how this can really take effect, and you're usually only getting the polar opposite viewpoints. But if it happens in a forum where everybody in that forum subscribes to that forum for a reason, you're going to get probably polarized opinions, people thinking sort of one way or one route. Okay, let's see if we can cover a little bit more in this podcast, and I'm clearly going to have to do another one because we're almost at 15 minutes, and they're limited to 15 minutes. So when we choose to interact with only those people who share our ideas and perhaps our prejudices, what we're doing is we're filtering out any opposing viewpoints. So people that surround themselves with like-minded individuals and never expose themselves to new ideas or new thoughts, they're really doing themselves a disservice, and they're almost confirming or sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy, making sure that their opinions stay as they are. They're not really willing to engage in that exposure to other ideas or other opinions. And so what happens in that is it often forms a more extreme opinion. And this is what social networks do, is they sort of allow for that dynamic to happen. And so here's where we get into groupthink, which occurs when you do have this situation where decision making is happening. And the group feels it's more important to maintain their unanimity as a group. Like, we have to stay united. We are one front. And it's sort of a cohesive thing. And so what they do is they don't consider other facts or options or opinions in their quest for staying cohesive. So let's stop there and I'll do one more podcast.